Echoes of the forgotten. Silence. Everything was still. Yet there was a weight in the air, something heavy, almost alive. Aaron walked into his apartment. A normal evening, yet something felt off. The door closed behind him, but he sensed a presence that shouldn't be there. He flipped the lights on. Everything seemed in place, yet, for a brief moment, he saw shadows moving on their own. The TV was off, but the screen flickered for a few seconds with dark, unrecognizable shapes. It felt as if unseen eyes were watching him. A strange pull drew him to the couch, as if it were whispering, "Sit, just sit." He sat, quietly, and then, a voice soft, almost imperceptible, seemed to come from nowhere. "You know what you've been waiting for, but you're not ready." The shadows froze for a heartbeat, then everything went dark. Cliffhanger. Aaron held his breath. Something behind him seemed to call his name. The apartment felt colder now. Every corner seemed to stretch further than it should, bending the room into shapes that didn't exist before. Aaron's phone buzzed, though he hadn't received a message. On the screen was a single word: "Watch." He looked around, empty. A soft scratching noise came from the walls, like fingernails tracing patterns too deliberate to be random. The shadows were no longer passive, they crept closer, curling toward him. He tried to turn on the TV to create some sense of normality, but it wouldn't respond. Instead, the screen flickered to life on its own, displaying grainy images of his own apartment, but angles that didn't exist. Then he heard it again, the voice. "You can't run, you never left." His reflection in the darkened window twisted for a fraction of a second. A version of himself with hollow eyes staring back, grinning. Cliffhanger. Aaron reached for the doorknob, but it melted under his hand like wax, leaving him trapped between reality and something else. The apartment was no longer familiar. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as if alive. Aaron's heartbeat echoed in his ears. He tried to call for help, but his phone only displayed static. Every sound he made was amplified: his own breathing, the soft shuffle of his feet, even the faint tapping of the pipes. From the corner of his eye, he saw figures emerging from the shadows, almost human, but twisted. They didn't move naturally, they slithered, stretching unnaturally, their eyes glinting with a strange hunger. Aaron backed away, colliding with the wall, and felt it soften under his hand. Like wet clay, the shadows laughed, a dry, hollow sound that seemed to come from inside the walls themselves. He stumbled toward the kitchen, desperate for something solid, but even the floor felt wrong. Bending subtly beneath him, the voice returned, louder this time. "You've been part of this all along. You just didn't see it." The lights flickered violently, then died. In total darkness, Aaron felt a cold hand grasp his shoulder. But when he turned, there was nothing there, just the whisper of the walls, telling secrets he wasn't meant to hear. He stumbled toward the kitchen, desperate for something solid, but even the floor felt wrong. Bending subtly beneath him, the voice returned, louder this time. "You've been part of this all along. You just didn't see it." Cliffhanger. Aaron screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the walls themselves, leaving him utterly alone with the whispers. Aaron stumbled through the darkness, the apartment twisting around him like a nightmare made real. Every doorway led somewhere unfamiliar, each hallway longer than it should be. He reached a mirror in the living room, only it didn't reflect him. Instead, it showed a version of himself with hollow eyes and a sinister grin, mimicking his every move but slightly delayed. A whisper came from the glass. "Do you see now? You were never alone." Panicking, Aaron turned away, but the walls seemed to close in, breathing and shifting, pressing against him. The shadows from earlier now stood at impossible angles, stretching toward him. reaching with hands that should not exist. He tried to scream, but his voice came out distorted, a mix of his own panic and some unseen entity's laughter. Then he noticed the floor under his feet liquefying, as if the apartment itself wanted to swallow him whole. The voice returned, calmer this time, almost mocking. "You belong here, as part of the walls, part of the whispers." Cliffhanger. Aaron's reflection in the mirror reached out and grabbed his hand from inside the glass, pulling him closer to something he could not see. Aaron stumbled backward, his eyes darting across the room. The ceiling now dripped with shadows, twisting like liquid ink in slow motion. Every droplet seemed alive, forming shapes that whispered his name. He tried to speak, but his words came out as garbled echoes, bouncing off walls that no longer obeyed geometry. The apartment had become a living labyrinth, every surface pulsing with intent. A cold breeze swept past him, carrying whispers. You thought you were safe, but safety is an illusion. Aaron's reflection in the mirror flickered now. It wasn't just his reflection, but a crowd of faceless copies, reaching toward him from the glass. Panic surged through him. He tried to flee, but every doorway led him back to the center of the room. Then he noticed the shadows from the ceiling slowly descending, forming hands that grasped at him, yet passed through his body, leaving him chilled to the bone. The voice returned again, calm, almost amused. "You've been part of this from the beginning. You just refused to see." Cliffhanger. Aaron felt himself being lifted slightly off the ground, suspended by invisible hands, as the shadows whispered louder, consuming the room. Aaron's eyes snapped open. He was lying on the same couch, the same flickering TV, the same cold air brushing his skin. For a moment, he thought it was just another nightmare. But then the static on the TV started whispering his name, Aaron Irene. He froze. The remote control was in his hand again, just like before. The clock on the wall showed 3:33 a.m. Again, his heart sank as the realization struck. Every sound, every breath, every flicker was identical. He had never escaped. He had only restarted. The loop never ends. Suddenly, the TV went black. A reflection appeared on the screen, not his, but a darker version, smiling faintly. "Now it's your turn to tell the story," it whispered. The screen shattered with a deafening crack. Everything went silent, except for one final sound, the recording button clicking on. When Aaron opened his eyes again, he wasn't in his apartment. The air was thick, damp. It smelled like dust and old paper. He stood in a narrow corridor lined with doors, each one slightly open, each one breathing. The floor creaked beneath his feet as he took a step. Somewhere in the distance, a clock was ticking backward. He called out, "Hello." No answer. But one of the doors closed by itself, softly. He reached for it. The moment his hand touched the handle, a whisper came from behind him. "Don't open what remembers you." He froze, slowly turned around, and saw something impossible. The wall at the end of the corridor began to move, like fabric stretching from inside. Something pressed against it, a shadow struggling to take shape. Aaron stumbled backward as a faint child's voice began humming, the same melody from his TV's static loop. Round and round, you never left the sound. He covered his ears, but the sound came from inside his head now, deep, echoing, endless. And then, all the doors opened at once. Every single one led to the same room, his apartment. Frozen in time at 3:33 a.m., Aaron stepped through one of the doors and found himself standing in a room made entirely of mirrors, floor, ceiling, walls. Every surface reflected him endlessly. 1,000 Aarons staring back. None of them blinked. He took a step forward, but his reflection didn't move. Instead, one of the mirrored versions smiled. "You finally found us." Aaron stumbled back. The reflections began to move, but not in sync. Each one acted differently. One screamed, one laughed, one cried. He turned to run, but the door was gone. All he could see now was himself, multiplying, distorting. Their faces began to melt into static. "You were never one," they whispered in unison. "You were all of us." The lights flickered. In every reflection, Aaron saw a different version of his life. Him as a child, as an old man, as something not human at all. The room pulsed like a living thing. He reached out to touch the glass, and the glass reached back. Cold hands shot out, grabbing his wrists, pulling him toward the mirror. "Join the reflection," they whispered. "The loop needs balance." The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him was his reflection smiling as it walked away, leaving him trapped inside the glass. Aaron woke up on the couch, the same room. Everything was exactly where it had been. The TV, the remote, the cold air, the silence. But something was wrong. The colors were off, too dark, as if the world had forgotten sunlight. And the hum in the air was louder now, deeper, almost alive. He turned on the TV, static ... But in the static, he saw movement, a silhouette, watching him from behind the screen. "You shouldn't have left the mirror," it said. Aaron's heart pounded. He dropped the remote and stepped back. His reflection in the TV glass didn't match his movements anymore. It smiled when he didn't. It blinked when he didn't. "We traded places," the reflection whispered. "You live here now." The lights began to flicker violently. Every flash revealed fragments of something behind the reflection. Faces pressed against the glass, hundreds of them, mouthing silent words. "Stay, stay, stay," Aaron screamed and smashed the TV, but the static didn't stop. It spilled out like smoke, wrapping around his hands, his face, his body. Then the whisper came again, right beside his ear this time. "You've been home all along." The screen lit up one last time, showing a still image, Aaron, sitting on the couch, smiling faintly, and behind him his reflection, moving on its own. Aaron's eyes opened once more. He was back on the couch. The room looked the same. The TV flickered faintly. The cold air brushed his skin, but something inside him had changed. He could hear a soft chorus of whispers, like hundreds of voices behind his own thoughts. He tried to speak, but his voice came out layered with others, echoing and distorted. "You never left, you never left." The TV static formed shapes, his own face, hundreds of them, staring with empty eyes. The reflection smiled, and then the room began to stretch, bend, and collapse inward at the same time. He ran toward the door, but it was gone. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, all mirrored, all alive. A whisper came, calm and knowing, "Every story ends only to begin again." Aaron tried to scream. His own scream bounced back at him, layered, distorted, multiplied. "The loop never ends. You belong. You belong." The static surged, and the darkness consumed him entirely. Then silence, then light, and Aaron woke up, back on the couch, again, and somewhere, in the static of the TV, a faint whisper laughed. "Hello again, Aaron." The cycle had begun anew.